As Brian mentioned, my name is Andy Barnitz, and I'm very excited to be here tonight because I have some great change stories to share with you. Over the last 15 years, as I mentioned, I had the privilege of leading many change management initiatives. As Kathy and I discussed prior, we're gluttons for punishment. We tend to put ourselves in positions where we can rescue projects. We tend to put ourselves into positions where our backs are against the wall. And so I'm very excited to tell you about this transformation story in particular. I have several to choose from. But before I do that, I want to first acknowledge Aziz and Brian. Thank you for bringing us together. It's a privilege to speak here. After meeting all of you tonight, I mean, we have folks that are interns. We have folks that are standing up PMOs. We have folks who head up technology for their organizations. What a great opportunity for us to share war stories. It's fantastic. And then secondly, I want to commend all of you for taking your time this evening and coming together. Please talk to me, talk to Kathy, talk to everyone in this room. Let's build a cohort if that's even an option moving forward. But let's ultimately spread the word about change management. Before I jump into my story of transformation, a little bit about me. So I just spent the last 7 months for a major retailer where I led a 55-week initiative. I served as the program lead, the project lead, the change lead, the test lead, the communications lead, and there's another lead in there that I forgot. Worked close to 80 to 100 hours a week. It was exhausting. Made the change or the decision to leave in October to get into the wonderful world of consulting. And the reason why I got into the wonderful world of consulting was to fill a gap. And that gap is change management. There is a change management gap in corporate America today. And my target is Fortune 500 organizations. In terms of my background, I have over 20 years experience in project management and change management and HR strategy. I've led or served in a program lead or project lead role for just over 100 projects, impacting over 2.5 million associates, employees, clients globally. So as you can imagine, as I mentioned, I am a glutton for punishment. Because were they all success stories? Absolutely not. In fact, what you'll learn tonight, and typically what you'll learn from me, are the failures. And I'm standing here today because I've been able to learn from those failures, learn from the past, and introduce these new concepts this evening. Let's go to the next slide. Today's objectives are threefold. You can finish the slide. It's got you in mind. So I want to introduce 3 transformation enablers. I want to demonstrate how to apply those enablers to your world. And last but not least, I'll have a case study of transformation on how you're going to employ those transformation enablers. Next slide, please. So Speech 101, I took it about 20-something years ago. They say, get to know your audience. So show of hands. Raise your hand if you're in a position where you're responsible for creating the vision, setting the strategy, or writing the objectives for a project. Couple in the room. Raise your hand if you're responsible for ensuring process and system adoption, stakeholder alignment, and ensuring that an organization needs to be prepared. And last but not least, this is too easy. You are a taskmaster responsible for delivering projects that are on time, within scope, and under budget. Basically, and that's the purpose of getting to know your audience. You're all me. So fast forward for some of you, 15, 20 years, this is what you're gonna look like, I'm sorry. But it's after a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. But again, if you have the privilege, that's gonna be the key word tonight, of being in a position to set the vision, drive adoption, and lead that initiative, you have just made yourself a very well-rounded, a very well-marketed and marketable individual. Let's go on to the next slide. I want to talk about my transformation enablers. Lucky for you, all this came out of 20 years of experience and at sometimes some failures. So I'm hoping to kind of give you the keys to the kingdom. Hopefully you're going to find a lot of these concepts practical and you'll be able to apply some of these concepts within your organization. First is the 3-legged stool. Second is think pink. Third, anyone tell me what PM and CM is? Project management and change management integration. Awesome. Next slide, please. Fill in the blank. What percent of your time do you spend defining what the strategy and objectives are for a project? Next. What percentage of your time do you articulate the why the project is important? And third, what percent of your time do you spend determining how the project will be delivered? Starting to see some key themes here. So when you think about a project, maybe you're bringing a new product to market. Maybe you're introducing new roles and responsibilities. Maybe you're rolling out new technology or several technologies at once. Throw it out there. Here's a hint, it must equal 100. If you were to put a percentage next to each of these, what would that be?
What would like less than 100?
70? 20, 70, 10. So 20% of the time you'll focus on the strategy, 70% is on the change management, and 10% is on project delivery. Anyone else want to stick their neck out?
Maybe more on the how, probably 70% on how.
70% on how? Okay, are you in IT? Okay. How about one more guess and then we'll move on?
So there's a difference between the what it should be and what it tends to be, right? It should be the why that should have the bulk of it.
Okay.
But you end up spending most of the time on the other two.
Excellent.
And very little on the why.
So there's no science behind this statistics, but here's what I'll tell you based on 20 plus years of experience. It should be equally distributed. 33%, 33%, and 33%. Because these are all equal. Next slide. As a result of this concept, or as a result of those statistics and conversations I've had with leaders and folks like yourselves, I've come up with a three-legged stool of success. It's not trademarked, it's not copywritten. This is just a concept that I've built that I apply at different organizations that I work at or I consult at. The base or the seat in this example is transformation delivery. For you, it might be bringing a product to market. For you, it might be a reorg for an organization, a new SAP finance or supply chain system. The first leg of the stool, hit space once, answers the question, what? What is it that we're trying to deliver? What's the vision and the strategy? What are the objectives? What is the business problem we're trying to solve? Second answers the question, why? Change management. Why is this initiative important? Why is this critical to the business? Last but not least, the how, which is project management. How do we intend on delivering this project? What resources will be required? What's our budget? What's our timeline? What's our scope and requirements? The big takeaway from the three-legged stool is if you remove any one of these legs, what happens? It wobbles and or it fails. Let's go ahead and apply this theory. Let's say we do a fantastic job in change management and we're setting the expectation, we have sponsorship, we have stakeholder buy-in, high adoption throughout the organization. And oh, by the way, we just have a crack team in IT. They can deliver any project. Any project. They can define requirements, they can build a beautiful project plan, and they can deliver. However, what if we miss the mark and fail to truly understand what the business problem is we're trying to solve? So you remove that leg of the stool, the project's going to fail. Let's take another example. Let's say we do a fantastic job of setting the vision and the strategy. We know where we're headed and ultimately how we're going to get there. Change management. We set the expectation, employees are bought in, they can't wait for this change to take effect. They can't wait to be impacted by this change. But we miss our deadline. Or we overuse our resources. Or we don't have the right plan in place. Or we're over budget. What happened? The project will fail. So the key takeaway here with the three-legged stool of success and your first transformation enabler is there has to be a balance across vision, strategy, change management, project management so that you can answer what, why, and how. The second slide is what I call Think Pink. Anybody hear of Daniel Pink? Anybody read the book Drive? One of my favorite books. Great deal of insights in that book. But I could save you $28.95. To me, the three greatest insights that I pull from that book are what he talks about, the surprising truth about what motivates us. He talks about autonomy, next, mastery, and purpose. And so you're asking yourself, wait a minute, I came here to learn about change management and stories of transformation. I'm not connecting the dots. Well, let's pause for a moment. When you think about transformation, what's the first word that comes to mind? Change. Change. Anything else? Technology. Resistance. Motivation. Overhaul. So tell me something. Are we robots? When we're leading these change initiatives, the initiative that I'll tell you about, I led a team of 119 people. Yes, 119. People say, why don't you just round it up to 120? Because each and every one of those individuals is important. So there's 119 people on my team across IT, marketing, communications, HR, you name it. How in the world am I, as a change leader, as a transformation leader, supposed to keep this team focused, keep them motivated, keep them moving along when our story of transformation was 55 weeks in length? Talk about a project 9 years in length. How in the world do we keep this project team motivated? How do you keep them engaged? How do you keep them bought in? This is where I introduce this concept of Think Pink. Now, he doesn't talk about it as Think Pink. It's just I put a kind of a funny, not a funny spin, but a catchy twist on it, if you will. Change or transformation enabler number 2. As you're staffing your projects, they have day-to-day jobs. They're busy. They have work commitments, they have personal commitments. So they're already making a sacrifice. So what I try to do is I try to put them in a position where they can make decisions. One of my Andyisms is adoption through inclusion. And the concept is, if you want to drive adoption on day 1, include as many people as you can in the conversation. Give them decision rights. Because when you go live, they can no longer say when someone says, well, why did Sally make the decision to have managed, this particular process? Historically, they throw their hands up, I don't know, that was a dumb decision. Now, hey, I can answer that question. I was a part of that project, and I was on the team that made that decision or did the research. Notice the difference, the ownership you're going to get when you go live versus if you don't offer these team members an opportunity to make decisions. Let's talk about mastery. Another one of my Andyisms is staff projects with the unusual suspects. So when you're talking about transformational change, organization-wide change, I had 119 people on this project team. I had a communications lead, a training lead. I had a change lead, project lead, program lead, that was me. But there were a lot of roles which I can bring in different resources. People who weren't necessarily communication experts, but people who aspired to be one or who had a passion around it. And so over the last 15 to 20 years, I've been inviting people to play certain roles where they get to flex certain muscles that they've never flexed. And when you flex your muscle, what happens? That's when you start to learn a new skill. In this example, mastery, I make sure that I have members on the team who want to do work that is outside their comfort zone and try to flex that muscle on their behalf. A quick side story. A couple years ago, I had everybody at the end of a kickoff presentation write on a Post-it. Tell me one skill you want to gain as a result of this project. They wrote it down, they handed it to me. 45, 46 weeks later, we went live, we had a celebration, everything was fantastic. Somebody said, hey, what about those Post-its? Somehow they remembered. And so I started holding them up and I said, Samia, you told me at the beginning of this project that you wanted to be involved in training development. Did you get that opportunity? And she said, yes. Samia was a lifelong recruiting coordinator. She's never developed training. She's never developed a training plan. My undergrad is in adult learning theory, so I was able to coach her on how to design instruction for adults. So that's just one example of when you give people unusual suspects an opportunity to grow and develop, get out of the way, because that's when the fun really starts to happen. And then last but not least, listen, we're all very busy. Many of us work 9 to 5, most of us work 9 to 7, and some of us work 9 to 9. Wouldn't it be great if we could wake up every morning and know that the work that we're doing is transformational, but it's also purposeful? So the big takeaway here is don't take your resources for granted. If you're leading a transformational change or you're a member of transformational change, talk to the project leader and say, hey, you know what, I talked to this guy, or I was a part of this group, and he talked about this idea of maybe we could actually empower the members of the team to make decisions. Maybe we can put unusual suspects, maybe don't use that language. Maybe we could take people who aren't familiar in certain areas and give them a chance to flex their muscle, or last but not least, how do we reinforce the purpose or the beneficiaries of this transformation? Next slide. Whew, a lot of colors. Integrated project and change management. This is Transformation Enabler 3. I can't reiterate enough that change management and project management activities should both start on day one. How do I know this? Because in 2003, I led a transformation initiative, 40 or so weeks in length. And we were about 2 weeks out from go live, and my senior vice president of HR said, well, when are we training these folks? When am I going to send out my communication? Do we know how prepared the organization is for this change? Do we know how ready the organization is? And I said, I'm 25 years old. I have no idea what you're talking about. And so that is why I'm so passionate, several years later and much wiser, to say change management and project management must start on the same day and ends on the same day. Let me rewind that. Project management does have an end date. Change management, generally speaking, when you're sustaining the change, is ongoing. Okay? Let's quickly talk about these concepts. So I've even color-coded it, or paint by numbers, if you will. So when you're planning and analyzing in a project, what are you doing? You're developing your project plan. You're figuring out your resources. You're defining your requirements. Look at change management. What are some of the activities you think we take care of within the change management, beginning of a change management cycle? Let's identify the change. Let's understand who's impacted by the change. Let's understand who are the sponsors of the change. What are some of the organizational attributes we need to be aware of? An example might be, we tried to implement this system in the past and it failed. Do you know how hard it is to come in after someone has rolled something out and it failed, and you try to do the same thing? You want to talk about resistance. And that was my role for many, many years, to come in and rescue projects. Yet again, glutton for punishment. All right, lower left-hand corner, fact, 70% of change efforts fail due to an overemphasis on the project process rather than people aspects. That's straight out of ProSci change management. One more thing I'll tell you about this. For those of you who are in IT, you think about change management. I love the fact you brought this up, Kathy. When they think change management, they think release management. When we talk about change management, it's about managing the people, managing the process, and making sure people are prepared and ready for the change. Next slide. So this is where theory meets practice. The project, HR digital transformation. The goal, people engagement and project adoption. You notice that? This isn't just about project adoption. We want to make sure that there's no collateral damage from a people perspective. How do we do that? Let's see if you're paying attention. Think pink. Give them autonomy. Give them an opportunity to learn a skill. And what's the third one? Purpose. Very good. Let me give you some deets. So it's a leading retailer. 45,000 employees, 1,200 stores. This is the delivery of a 2-year transformation roadmap. This organization, who will remain nameless, very averse to change. You would think on the cover they're progressive, very future-focused, but pretty averse to change when it comes to new technology, new process, new roles and responsibilities. Next slide, please. So let's go ahead and apply the three-legged stool to this case study. So what? A desire to standardize core processes, need to optimize roles and responsibilities, and a simplified self-service solution. Next slide. The why. HR is viewed as a support function. Companies behind the HR technology curve. Prior projects were not successfully implemented. So I was in an unenviable position where I had to not only design, develop, construct, and architect our 2.5-year technology roadmap, but I had to deliver it after folks prior to me failed to deliver. Corporate and distribution center management wanted more autonomy. Next slide. The how. Notice the three-legged stool approach. Employ thoughtful project management, devise proven change management strategy, introduce standard yet common change tools, and then use tested change management tools scaled to the needs of the project. Great question earlier. What's the best way to sell your services if you're an external change management consultant or you're internal and you're trying to say to your leader, hey, listen, I need change management support. What is he or she going to say? Oh, that's bureaucracy, that's red tape. Instead, approach it differently and say, well, what if we brought in a change consortium who use standard tools, common language, tools that are consumable, tools that are as easy to use as it is to navigate Google, Zappos, Amazon. And then big key word here, scaled. Change management folks tend to come in with a hammer looking for a nail. If you want to be successful, come in with a targeted approach, a surgical approach to say, this is your change need, here's how I can kind of fill that need. And then from that point forward, it'll create new opportunities for you. Next. So what were the results? Despite 80 to 100 hours a week for 7 months, and probably 50 to 60 hours a week for another 4 to 5 months, we did it. We were able to drive or deliver a project that with high adoption and with high people engagement. We effectively transitioned managers to own associate transactions. Senior leader buy-in was strong. More informed HR function around change management, as I mentioned earlier. I came in here trying to teach them the discipline of change management in an hour, and it didn't work. It was over their heads, okay? But through this project, theory met application, and as a result, they have a much more informed HR function, understanding the value of change. Proven delivery model for future growth and expansion. Next slide. And next. All right, this is the secret sauce, and then we're done. Why was the project so successful? And this can go for all the other transformation initiatives I've led. First and foremost, ensure that the what, the why, and the how are in balance, the three-legged stool. Secondly, unleash the power and passion of the unusual suspects. Provide stakeholders and team members with decision rights, autonomy, think pink. Ensure the project team, stakeholders, and sponsors have a shared, purposeful vision. And the steady thread throughout is project management and change management integration. Any questions?
Was there any concern when you were taking your unusual suspects and enabling opportunities for them to learn the new skill? Was there any concern from your perspective of them not being able to develop their skills and be able to deliver the project that you're trying?
Great question, great question. So as someone who's led teams for the last 15 years, my personal recruiting belief is hire the attitude, teach the skill. So I employed that same concept as I was staffing my projects. So in that example, absolutely, were there concerns when somebody came to me and said, hey, I would like to lead this is a true story. I would like to lead the change management effort for this project. This person could barely spell change management. They've never been exposed to real change management. They knew communications, they knew training, but they didn't have any insight into stakeholder analysis, techniques for measuring change, sustaining change, and so forth. So in those situations, they're difficult conversations. But majority of the time, my commitment to them is I would coach them along behind the scenes, as in the example with Samia. It's a good question. How I usually answer those types of questions is I ask a lot of questions. As whether you're an external consultant or you're an internal employee, Ask a lot of questions, dig deep, try to unearth what are the challenges that they're, what's a business problem they're trying to solve. From there, you don't start throwing different tools and templates at them. You certainly don't start throwing a strategy or a methodology at them. What I often do is I will get them to a point where they think that they came up with the solution. And from there, you can't argue with the buy-in.